What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the Fan Committee Football Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Tooman, as always, and today, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Herrera. Mike, how you doing this week after a interesting week 4?
I'm good. I liked this week's slate of games. We thought these were going to be a lot of weird games. But it turns out that they were kind of interesting at the least. So that's always fun. But I did want to start off the pod with a just a little tangent about the Dolphins. I know we didn't play.
Okay.
Well, we already played our game this week,
Mhm.
but I just wanted to point out that as of now, Teddy Bridgewater is the starting quarterback. Tua is already ruled out for the next game against the Jets. But I'm not super worried about that. I think Teddy Bridgewater, all things considered, played very admirably in relief in the Bengals game, although he did unfortunately throw an interception. But, I don't blame the team for being a little rattled. But, I think we're going to be okay with Teddy. But that's just a little update I wanted to do on it. But let's get started with some of the interesting games.
Yeah, for sure. The Dolphins, I think I like Teddy. Like, he's a good backup. So I'm hoping you guys can stay competent for the next month or so. I think Tua needs a couple weeks off here, even if the concussion isn't as bad as it looked on Thursday, even if he is back with the team already. I still think they should give him ample amount of time to recover. So hopefully Teddy can play pretty well in relief, and hopefully you guys can still make a playoff push. But yeah, to get into the games this week, I think we can start with last night's game, the Monday night game. Niners Rams. We've been talking about the Rams a lot on this pod and how disjointed they looked. I think they played even worse last night than against Buffalo, all things considered. At least against Buffalo, they forced some Josh Allen turnovers. There was no such effort last night against the Niners.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an interesting game for the Rams. I thought that the Niners could win, but I didn't anticipate it to be this bad. I thought the Rams would put up a little bit of fight. Cooper Kupp played amazingly. He destroyed me in fantasy this week. He's on your team.
Oh
But
yeah, I beat you with the combo of Jefferson and Kupp. Yeah.
yeah, but I just think that it's not looking good for the Rams. I think the Rams could possibly bounce back, but I think a lot of the issues that Matt Stafford just has not played well. The running backs aren't playing amazing. Like Cam Akers is very, very just not playing well. I mean, the offensive line is very banged up. There's a lot of starters out. So it just kind of seems like a mess. Allen Robinson's not playing well either. Their star player, Ben Skoranek, also got injured, unfortunately. I'm still baffled as to why Skoranek is still on the field for like every play. And I understand that, Van Jefferson's injured and stuff like that. Yeah. But honestly, Brandon Powell is better. And it's also just the fact that like Tutu Atwell, their second round draft pick last year, just hasn't played this year. I understand that like clearly he hasn't shown something in practice, but like you at least have to put him out there. He's going to provide you something Ben Skoranek's not at the very least. Tutu Atwell, he's a deep threat, and that's what they need. They were talking about on the broadcast as well. They were like, the Rams sorely miss someone to stretch the field, spread the defense out thin, which is what Antonio Brown, Odell did last season for them. And, and they're sorely missing that because he unfortunately tore his ACL. So it's kind of weird that this team is still running out Skoranek and not at least attempting to get Tutu Atwell up to speed with the rest of the team. But I think it's a very disappointing season for the Rams so far. Maybe they can bounce back because some of their games in the schedule don't look horrendous so far, but the 49ers have been also a little up and down. It's kind of hard to tell where their season's going because they played pretty badly in some games, pretty decently in some others. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
See, I think the Niners are probably going to win this division, but it is interesting. All 4 teams are 2-2. So everybody's, still in the race, especially we're going to talk about Seattle later. I mean, they look I don't know what to make of that performance, but they look great. I think the Niners are probably, I think I said this last week, they're my pick for this division right now. I think with Debo, Jeff Wilson's looked really good. Like I've always kind of liked him, but he's kind of taken the role of the number 1 back and ran with it this year. Yeah. Kittle, they got to get Kittle more involved, but at the same time, they're playing pretty well, so I can't really fault them. Their defense. How about Hufanga? Hufanga is like going to make the All-Pro team. I didn't know who this guy was. He was a rookie last year, didn't play much. He has burst on the field, onto the scene this year, and he's been really good all 4 games for them. I think he's pretty much one of their stars on defense right now. And to add a great player in the secondary when you already got guys like Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, that's really going to complete the defense. So I think they're in good shape. Rams, I agree with you. I think this receiving core is actually maybe their biggest issue. The O-line needs to get healthy. I agree, but I still think the defense is okay as the season progresses. I think this receiving core is the problem. lot of people are counting on Odell coming back maybe in November, December. I think they got to make a move quicker. I think they
Yeah.
got to fill that. I know Allen Robinson, they paid him and he has the name, but they got to find more bodies to use that. Not bodies. I don't want to demean him, but they need to find more players that they can use because Robinson, he's just not playing like a number 2, so he needs some more help. So I agree. Cooper Kupp can't be doing it all.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been kind of weird with what's happening to them because it feels like the Rams should be a better team, but like it's I agree, the receiving core is kind of the biggest issue because Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, they're like fine, all things considered. I think it's really just because the O line's not opening up holes for them.
Mhm.
But I agree, Cooper Kupp can't do everything, and I think it's kind of odd that they haven't really brought in any new guys to like try and help. I do think we're gonna end up seeing a trade at the deadline, possibly if because it kind of seems like Odell's not coming back to the Rams. He's visiting the Giants. He dropped hints that he might join the Packers. It's kind of odd.
That's not happening.
It might not, but like apparently
that for 5 years, he's not coming.
He was talking about it. So I don't know, but he's like visiting the Giants. It kind of seems like he's going anywhere but the Rams. Shockingly, I thought it was a lock that he'd come back to the Rams. I figured the Rams were just gonna wait till he's healthy and then they'll re-sign him. But it kind of seems like that's less and less likely. And Van Jefferson's gonna come back, but you're also then worried about who's your number 3 receiver because Van Jefferson was the number 3, and I like Van Jefferson. I think he's very quality guy. But and so maybe he can step into that number 2 role, and maybe Allen Robinson moving to the 3 might help him out a little bit more, but that remains to be seen. So I think Van Jefferson coming back and whether or not Odell is re-signed is a huge thing for this team moving forward.
I think you're not gonna like this. Just sign Will Fuller. I just see it. He probably will get hurt, but what's good? What's it gonna hurt? He's a good player. Or T.Y. Hilton, even just as a veteran. There's guys out there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Coerce Emmanuel Sanders to give it one more year. He wasn't half bad last year. Whatever it is, there's guys available. I know they're not the guys they used to be at their peaks, but this team needs more help, as we both just said. So yeah, I think the Rams definitely got to make a move, either trade or sign someone. I think Odell will come back, but it's not worth debating. We don't know for sure. So hopefully, I hope for the Rams' sake he does come back. But we'll have to see what happens with that. But I agree, the Rams are in a bit of a sticky situation to say the least with how their season has gone so far. Another big NFC team who had a big loss this week, although they scored a lot more points, that was on Sunday Night Football. Tampa lost 41-31 to the Chiefs. You especially were going in on the Chiefs offensive play calling last week, and rightfully so, because it was pretty bad against the Colts, but they bounced back in a big way against Tampa. It all started immediately when Rachaad White fumbled that kick return, and it immediately gave the Chiefs a quick 7-0 lead with the Kelsey touchdown and just expanded from there. What was your take on that game?
I like the way the Chiefs play. Obviously the score gives you a different story because it kind of lets you believe that the Bucs team was a lot closer to winning this game than they actually were. The Chiefs were in the driver's seat all game. They were really just putting out an offensive showing. It's just that eventually, towards the back half of the game, you got to slow down. Obviously, your defense is wearing thin and whatnot because they're out there most of the game because the offense was just firing on all cylinders. I really liked what we saw out of the wide receivers and the running backs. I think they all played admirably. No one really stood out as like an insane playmaker, except for, of course, Patrick Mahomes. I think after that game, I think people who still believe that Patrick Mahomes is not the best quarterback in the league need to open their eyes because it's insane what this guy does. I mean, he broke a tackle using a spin move against a defensive lineman. He flips it to Clyde Edwards-Helaire for a touchdown. I mean, it's insane what he manages to do week in, week out, and I think a lot of people just don't give enough credit for it because I think people like to hate Mahomes because he's kind of like the next Brady in a sense. He's good, he's winning, he's on the top constantly, and I think people don't like that. But I mean, he's the best in the league, and he really showed that this last game.
I completely agree. That Clyde Edwards-Helaire receiving touchdown was crazy. How he got the ball to him. Speaking of Clyde, he had 2 touchdowns. He ran the ball well. Pacheco ran the ball well. So you're saying, the running backs started to look. They played pretty well in week 1. They got back to doing that this week against a really, really good run defense in Tampa. So I'm surprised Tampa wasn't able to stop them more. But yeah, I think the Chiefs have done a good job in going from Tyreek Hill to just getting all these different receivers involved. They all showed up. Even Sky Moore got a little work this week. So I think all these guys played pretty well and filled their roles effectively. And I completely agree with you. Like, the Bucs were never in a position to win this game, even though they only lost by 10 and scored 31. I mean, I never thought they were going to win this game. Brady did play well, but it was also because they passed the entire game because they were down the entire game. They ran 6 times. So Brady passed 52 times. That's why his stats look so good. I'm not saying he had a bad game by any means. He had a good game, but I'm not going to like walk back what we were saying the past few weeks about this could be a down year for Brady. I think it's still very possible.
Yeah,
That
no,
doesn't mean Brady's going to be as bad as Daniel Jones or anything. We're not saying that, but this could still, in the long run, I still think this is going to be a down year for Brady and what could be his last year.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think the best example would be if you look at Leonard Fournette's like stat line. He had -3 rushing yards, but then like a bunch of receiving yards. And I think that's really just goes to show you like how kind of off balance this Buccaneers team is. Also, their defense is solid. I don't want to disparage them. I kind of like in the past few weeks, I kind of made it seem like their whole team is bad. I don't mean it that way. It's just that like the offense is playing so disappointingly compared to where they should be that the defense is kind of suffering as a result because like there's only so much your defense can do if your offense isn't at least giving you some help. They need to pick up some of the slack. And it's just kind of interesting. They brought in guys like, they brought in Julio Jones, which is crazy as like your number 3 receiver. And now he's like your number 1 because Godwin and Evans Godwin's injured again. Sadly, he came back from his injury, got re-injured in the game. Evans, he played good in the game, but I think he disappeared for a lot of it. He had the touchdown catch and a few good catches. Well, than that, he didn't really do a lot, which is kind of a shame because Mike Evans is one of the most underrated receivers in this league right now. But
he had good
overall,
stats. He had good stats. I'll be honest. I don't really remember if he like disappeared for a whole quarter or not. I don't really remember when each of those catches happened. But he looked like he had a really good game in my eyes.
It was more like the first, like it was the beginning of the game when the Chiefs were like really just kind of pulling ahead that like he wasn't doing much. But I think that's also because the Bucs as a whole were struggling. And I think that kind of speaks to the Buccaneers is that the moment that they like fall far behind, it's kind of too late for them to really do anything outside of that. And I think the only outliers would be like the Saints game or like the Packers game. And even then, I think the Packers still played a much better game than they did. And I believe it was last week's game. So, Mike Evans, he's really good, but he can't carry this whole offense on his back, especially because Julio as well as injured. This guy who we thought was going to have a pleasant bounce back season after last year, very injury riddled. He's also injured again, which is a shame because he played pretty good in week 1. So this Buccaneers team, I would say, is disappointing overall.
Yeah, I thought the Julio signing, I didn't think it was going to be this insane signing, but I also thought it was going to go a lot better. He hasn't really done anything for this team yet. He only had 2 more yards than Cole Beasley in this game. So I don't know. There's not a lot cooking in Tampa right now. I know they've scored 31, but yeah, I'm just not happy with how they're playing. But I think the Chiefs, as we mentioned, I'm very happy with how they came out and responded to that Colts loss. Shows me that they're serious contenders, to say the least. They're able to mount such a good offensive performance against such a good defense that's been good all year up to this point. So good win for the Chiefs. I agree. So moving to Tom Brady's former team, the Patriots played my Packers this week. I think you're going to be more critical of the Packers than I am. Because I don't know why. I just have a feeling like I was getting very upset, but by the end of the game, I was kind of happy with how the Packers ended the game, and it kind of made me a little bit more optimistic about us. But what was your take on this game? Obviously, the fact that third string quarterback Bailey Zappi came in and at least had them in the game, although he didn't do much as a passer. He was pretty limited in how far down the field he was throwing. The running backs did most of the work. It was still bad to be almost losing to the third string rookie.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to be very critical because like at a surface level, because I think it's insane for a team as good as the Packers to almost lose to Bailey Zappi of all players. But the Packers still won the game and they didn't completely sell it. So I don't think it's fair to say that they're choke artists just yet. That remains to be seen until the playoffs come around. But I think the Packers, I didn't see the whole game, but I watched some of the highlights. I don't think the Packers necessarily played awful. I just don't think they played up to their standards, which is what allowed this Patriots team to like run back into it. Because as you're saying, Bailey Zappi didn't do a lot. It was more so the fact that the running backs from Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris both had excellent games.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of speaks to what their one problem I feel defensively might be is like the running backs. Like they got to defend them a little bit better. And their front seven, Kenny Clark's really good, but there's only so much he can do. And because if I remember correctly, Rashawn Gary and Smith, they're like rushers. They're
Yeah.
not
No,
interior
they
line.
don't really play the run much. No.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of like where their issue is, but I think they'll be fine because I think every team has a bad game, and you could say that that was the Buccaneers game, but I think the Buccaneers are a better team than the Patriots, so I don't think it's fair to say that that was
Hmm.
a bad game for them because I think the Green Bay Packers were pretty much in control most of that game.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about the Packers yet, but if a trend like this in this manner continues, then I would start to hit the panic button. But for now, every team's got their bad games. It's similar to the Dolphins. I understand that we lost Tua for a few weeks and we lost to the Bengals, and that's a tough loss. But I'm not ready to just give up on my team just yet. I'm sure you feel the same way. I think the Packers are still going to be a good team, and I think it's kind of just it's unfortunate that like this happened, but it happens to every great team. I don't think every team is going to be perfect all the way through. So
Yeah, I agree. It's just the fact that I don't think the Packers are a Super Bowl level team right now, but I'm not. I think we're very much going to make the playoffs. My concern right now is I actually think people are going to blame the miscommunications on the receivers. They're going to act like it's because we don't have Devontae Adams. Whatever. I get that narrative. I think we have two legit top two receivers. I think Dobbs is he a top 10 number one receiver? No, but I think he's already proven that he's pretty capable of being a good player. And Alan Lazard had a great game this week as well. I think Cobb has come up big. Like just Cobb isn't going to be consistently giving you plays, but Rodgers knows where to find him. He knows he has the chemistry with him. So Cobb has come up with some good plays. My thing with Rodgers is I just think he's been kind of reckless. And, I said before the season, I wanted Rodgers to be more aggressive this year because, he didn't have Devontae to just rely on to haul in 11 catches. So he might need to throw some more interceptions. But I meant that as like, just take some more risk throwing it down the field, like he did to Dobbs when Dobbs would have caught that touchdown if he didn't bobble it when he was coming down. That would have changed the game. But that's the kind of risk I want to take because that was 3rd and 8. But I don't want the risk that where it led to the pick six, where Rodgers basically snapped the ball and immediately threw it. Basically didn't even look at the coverage, and he's done that a couple times this year. He's overthrown people a lot. I think that those quick like snap and throws that worked with guys like Devontae, and it works with Cobb because he's been doing it with him for a while. That's a lot of the receptions Cobb had the last few weeks. But Romeo's going to have to get adjusted to that. Watson's going to have to get adjusted to that. They're not there yet. So I think Rodgers needs to, I don't know, like he just kind of needs to take it all in more and kind of take the time. I think the Packers offense is our biggest issue right now because the other thing I don't like is I thought Aaron Jones should have been like a 90 catch guy this year, and we haven't used him as a pass catcher as much as I would want any of the weeks. He played great this week. Don't get me wrong. He had a great game, but maybe he could have had, 90 rush yards instead of 110, but then also had 50 receiving yards. I think he needs to be the number one receiver almost. Dobbs has played well. We'll see if he can be a true number one, but I think him and Jones should be carrying most of the load in the receiving game. So I'd like to see Aaron Jones used even more effectively. And finally, to wrap up my points here, I agree with your take on the run defense. Should be a lot better with guys like Campbell and Walker. And I don't even think Campbell's played bad, so I don't really know what the issue is. But the run defense has been bad, and it's undermined how good the secondary and the pass rush has been because they've both been lights out.
yeah, no, I do agree. I think an interesting point you mentioned was like Rodgers is kind of it seems like he's a little antsy in the pocket sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't know what exactly the reason for that might be. Maybe it's because he's getting older. Obviously the older you get, the harder it is to play this game. But I think maybe Rodgers might be starting to finally feel that pressure of like not delivering on how many years the Packers have had a good team in a row. And I think that might starting to get to him. But I think Aaron Rodgers, he's an all-time great. I think he just needs to settle down and be confident in himself. And as much as I don't like Rodgers, I mean, this is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, And I don't know. I think maybe it's kind of a weird season for the Packers. Devontae Adams is gone. He no longer has that safety net he can rely on. Tunyon hasn't really been that either because usually that's what people consider the tight end. The tight end's your safety net,
Yeah.
and I think that kind of explains why he's not able to get into much of a rhythm as he used to be. And I think he just needs to learn how to trust his receivers a little bit more. But that's gonna take time. It's only week 4, so
Mhm.
that remains to be seen. But I think the Packers are going to be okay. I think, as you mentioned, you guys have a stellar secondary. And I think overall, I think the Packers are going to be just fine. They're going to make the playoffs, and hopefully they can go far that year. So,
Yeah, we need Jair to stay healthy. I'm not too concerned because it's just a little minor groin injury, but that caused him to miss the game this past week, and then Amos went out very early in the game, so we were dealing maybe arguably our two best secondary players. I think Stokes is in there as well, but two of the three best were out for pretty much the entire game against the Patriots, and I still think the secondary was pretty good because it's not like Bailey Zappi was. How many yards did he throw to? I have it here. He only had 99 pass yards. Hoyer had 37. So that's only about 125-ish yards for this team, 135, whatever it is. Yeah, it's not like they were passing that well on us. They were just checking down the whole time, which is why the completion percentage was so high. But yeah, Harrison Stevenson killed us, and Dalvin killed us week one. The Montgomery killed us against the Bears, even though we won that game pretty decisively. He still was great. So we need to shore that up for sure. But I agree. I think we're going to be okay. Whether we can win the NFC, I don't know. It helps me sleep better at night that the Rams and Tampa also look really bad. Like it's really only the Eagles, but that's only one team. So, maybe something will manifest as the year goes along. So I'm still kind of optimistic about the Packers, but as of right now, I don't think this is a Super Bowl team. But I'm optimistic. I'll say that. So that'll do it. That's enough Packers for me for today. Maybe we'll see what happens next week when we play this damn London game. I do not want to wake up for. I even tweeted. I said, if we lose the Bailey Zappi, I'm not waking up for this game, but we won, so I have to wake up. Anyway, moving on to what I think you and I think I agreed with you. What we thought was going to be the best game of the week: Bills and Ravens. Ravens were home. I picked the Ravens to win, and I was feeling great about that at the beginning of the game when they were up. What was it?
20-3.
14-0. What was it?
I think they were up 20-3 at one point.
Oh, so they had all 20 points. Okay, 20-3, and then they lose 23-20. Yeah, that's a terribly blown loss. Falcons-esque. What was your take on this Bills comeback?
I don't want to be mean to the Bills, but I think it's more so once again, this is kind of like it's gonna seem contradictory, but I think the Ravens defense kind of just sucks. Their secondary is just not amazing for some reason. There's just a lot of lapses in coverage and a lot of blown plays. And Marcus Peters, he gets into you see everyone's talking about he's getting into a yelling match with John Harbaugh after the game.
Yeah.
And admittedly, John Harbaugh, I understand where his reasoning came from for trying to go for the win. I get that, especially with like such a stellar offense like the Bills. You want to hold them you want to hold on to as much of a lead as possible. So I did get it. But ultimately, I also understand why people were upset with him because obviously the field goal is a safer bet. They probably would have won them the game because they probably could have outlasted the Bills. Because I don't think the Bills played amazingly in this game, to be honest for you. Josh Allen had a bit of a down game this week. He wasn't amazing. He went 19 for 36, which is it's just very down for him. And, I think that the Ravens kind of just I don't know what's going on with them because their offense is insane. We've talked about this a lot already, but Lamar Jackson's carrying this team. And I think that really showed because even when the Bills played badly, the Bills still came back and won this game. Mm-hmm. And I think really the Ravens defense needs to step up and needs to improve if they want to go anywhere into the playoffs even because, they'll make the playoffs, I'm sure, because they're definitely the best team right now in their division. But if they can improve, they're not making it past the first round, and that's not a good look for them.
I definitely agree. I think that's it's really concerning how bad the Ravens defense has been. I thought this was going to be a good Ravens defense. I thought that was going to be the reason. That was my prediction for why the Ravens would get back to the playoffs was because I thought the defense was going to be a big part of that. Turns out it might just because Lamar has taken the jump. And, even this week, Bateman and Andrews didn't do anything, and the Ravens still started pretty good at this game. Dobbins didn't have an efficient game, but he did have 2 touchdowns and only his second game back, so that's encouraging to see. I don't know why the Ravens blew this game. It kind of just seemed like it just happened. Like, I don't even think they did anything, like, horrifically bad besides, I guess, at the end when Harbaugh decided to try to go for the win. But other than that, in the midpoint of the game, I wasn't saying, oh, the Ravens are about to blow this. It kind of just happened. So, I don't know. I think the Bills, it was a good win for them. It shows that they can come back from being down, but at the same time, I agree. I think the Ravens needed to do a lot more. They definitely could have won this game. So I'm a bit concerned about them. Still think they're a good team. The weather, playing in the hurricane, not a literal hurricane, but the rainstorm from the hurricane definitely affected the game. As the next game we're going to touch on the Eagles, that also affected them. But I don't know. I still wanted to see more from the Ravens. I agree.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a shame because I think we thought this was going to be a great game, but we thought the Ravens were going to be an excellent team. I remember early on when we were doing our team previews, I was a little down on them,
Yeah.
but ultimately the Ravens came out, guns blazing early in the season, but they've kind of cooled off in the second half of these first 4 weeks, and it's kind of interesting to see that with the Ravens. And hopefully they can get it together because there's good pieces in this secondary. Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Williams. I mean, these are excellent players. These are some of the better guys at their positions. And it's kind of weird that none of them are really playing up to the expectations they should be, especially when Josh Allen, and I understand that he's one of the best QBs in the game right now. I mean, the guy's taking a huge leap from where he used to be his rookie year. But even when he has a down game, this to still lose and have these lapses, it's not encouraging for them. And, as much as, John Harbaugh is to blame for this loss, I think Marcus Peters, who's on the other end of that yelling match, is also partially to blame. I think the defense played badly, and I think the sooner the Ravens defensive players realize that they're part of the problem and hopefully get into gear, the better this team will be. But as of now, it's kind of interesting. So, well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think Ravens defense across the board. Peters come back from the injury. Hamilton was a high draft pick. Marcus Williams, a big profile signing, and Humphrey's obviously been established there as well. So all those guys have a lot of talent. They just got to harness it. They got to put the effort in. I don't know what the issue is, but I feel like that's a unit that can work. It's just not working right now. So they're gonna have to fix that up. They're gonna have to shore that up. So going to another game, as I touched on, that was being played in a rainstorm. That was the Eagles and the Jags. And the Eagles fell down 14-0 after a quick pick six by the Jags. Andre Cisco had it on Jalen Hurts. And then Jacksonville scored again. I can't quite remember who scored their second touchdown, but they were up 14-0. But the Eagles win this game 29-21. They rally back. The home crowd supporting them in the rain. What was your take on this? To me, this has only solidified both teams as teams that are good, but ultimately it proved that the Eagles have that experience over the Jags and that they're the better team.
Oh, for sure. I do think that although it does, I'm sure, sting for the Jaguars to have lost this game, I don't think that Jaguars fans should suddenly stop being optimistic. I'm still on this, Jaguars bandwagon. I still think they're going to be a great team. I still think they're going to win this division. I think it's just tough to go up against what is, I feel, currently the best team in the league right now. And the Eagles, they played excellently. They really they did get down early, as you mentioned, but they were still able to rally and get a come from behind victory. And they played pretty well, things considered, regardless of the rain. So I think, yeah, there was a bit of a sloppy game from both teams on some occasions. Jalen Hurts didn't have his best game, but even without Jalen Hurts playing at the level he has been, they still managed to secure that victory. So I think that's really speaks volumes to how good this Eagles team really is. And I think we're going to see the Eagles make it really far into the playoffs, possibly even the Super Bowl if they continue to play like this. But I still think the Jaguars also, as I mentioned, I still think they're also going to make the playoffs. And I think it was a good matchup for both these teams. Really, it's going to help them define some of their strengths and weaknesses so they can work on those and continue improving.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The Eagles, to me, what stuck out in this game to me was that they found a run game. I mean, I know they were in the rain, so they were less likely to pass, but Miles Sanders looked incredible. Kenny Gainwell and even Trey Sermon on 2 carries all also played pretty well. Hurts had a rushing touchdown. So if Miles Sanders is going to play this well, that's going to be a huge boost to this team because obviously with Brown and Goddard and Devontae Smith and even Quez Watkins, they already have a lot of options in the passing game. So if they can balance the offense, we were talking about last week, that was a concern we had, is if they can consistently run the ball. I know this was in the rain, so it might have changed the game plan. But going forward, you don't got to give Miles Sanders 27 carries, but get him involved. Give him more than 8 to 10 carries, whatever he was getting last week or the last few weeks after a big week one performance. He's got to be consistently involved, and I think that can really help them. And the other thing is this defense is just great. I mean, we've already talked about it, but Hassan Reddick, 2 sacks. He was an offseason acquisition. James Bradbury continued to play great. He had another interception this week. Brandon Graham, he didn't have a sack this week, but he's come back from the injury. He's looked good despite being older, up there in age. Jordan Davis, the rookie, he's been good. All these acquisitions plus Slay, guys like that already being there. This is a great defense, and I think it held up after going down 14-0. A lot of people are saying the Eagles, they went up early on these teams and then let people get back into the games. They did the opposite this week. They got down, but then they fought back. They proved they can fight back, and then the defense held Jacksonville to only 7 points. throughout the last three quarters. So I think that's really impressive, and I'm really encouraged with the Eagles.
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was a great game, and as you're right, I would say that the Eagles just continue to show their dominance as one of the great teams in the league this year, and I think it's really exciting to see how far they're going to go. As we know, our friend Matthew, of course, he's a big Eagles fan, so it's good to see that he's so happy about it, and it's also just really interesting to see the Eagles. Last season they were bounced from the playoffs in horrendous fashion. Quite frankly, they laid an egg in that game against the Buccaneers, and it's really encouraging to see them bounce back. And I think it's great for Nick Sirianni because I think Nick Sirianni had a lot of detractors after last season as well. A lot of people weren't sold on him, but he's really stepped it up this year, and it seems like he's going to continue because I don't see any reason for this Eagles team to really fall back down to earth unless some major injury happens to Jalen Hurts. Because even if one of the receivers goes down, they've got plenty behind them too. So I think they're fine on all fronts. So I think the Eagles are going to be. I think they're Super Bowl favorites right now. Me personally, at least.
Yeah, I definitely think they're at least the NFC favorites. I don't know about the Super Bowl, but they're definitely playing great. And Jags, I agree with you. I think they're going to be all right. I think they're going to win that division. I'm standing by that prediction. I mean, I know the Titans won this week. They're looking a little better, but I still am confident in Jacksonville. So, I think the Eagles, like you said, I think they're playing great. So their division rivals, though, the Cowboys, are also playing great right now. They're 3-1 despite the absence of Dak Prescott. Cooper Rush, 4-0 as a starter, 3-0 this season. They beat the Commanders handily, 25-10. This is another team whose defense, I think, is playing very, very well. Trayvon Diggs is starting to play like more of an actual corner instead of just a ball hawking corner who can just, bring in the interceptions. But he's allowed a lot less yards on average than he was last year. So I think both the offense and the defense for Dallas might have had its best game of the season yet against Carson Wentz and the Commanders. What did you think of the Dallas win this week?
I don't like the Cowboys, but I do have to give it to them. I think Cooper Rush played excellently. Unfortunately, the only win the Commanders got was that their uniforms looks nice.
Yeah, I like them. Some people were saying they didn't like them. I kind of like them.
I think there's a few things weird with the uniform, like having the W on the front of the helmet's kind of odd, but that's neither here nor there. I like the uniforms. I think they're cool. Unfortunately, they still lost. And also, unfortunately, Jahan Dotson, our Penn State guy, he's out 1 to 2 weeks with a hamstring injury, which is unfortunate. But that probably means more touches for the likes of Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. And those guys are electric when they have the ball in their hands. So I think the Commanders offensively will be fine. But at the same time, Carson Wentz did not play excellently for the second week in a row. He's played kind of badly, which is a shame because these first 2 weeks, he at the very least he played well enough where the team could get the win. And ultimately, they fell short because, Carson Wentz, he's very hot and cold type of player. He throws a lot of interceptions when he doesn't need to. And it's just kind of a mess. I think the Commanders are a better team than this. They should be scoring more than 10 points, and they should be holding the Cowboys to less than 25. I don't think the Cowboys offensively are an amazing team. They don't really have like a standout wide receiver anymore. Even Noah Brown, who seems to be their number one, he's nothing super special. He's a pleasant surprise.
I think CD's the number one, but yeah.
Oh, wait, sorry. I don't know why I forgot about CD. That's insane. Probably because CD Lamb also, unfortunately, has a tendency to kind of disappear sometimes, and he doesn't play. He just doesn't do much. But yeah, no, it's CD. But, offensively, the Cowboys aren't amazing, nor are they defensively amazing. So it's not good for the Commanders to have lost by 15 like this. They lost by 2 scores when I think they should be a better team than this. I think defensively, there's definitely a few struggles. Like I think their secondary is very weak, but I think the rest of their team is pretty decent, all things considered. Yeah. And it's interesting to see that they're not putting it all together. And it's kind of weird because, they have Ron Rivera as their head coach. I don't know about you, but I'm a big Ron Rivera fan. I think he's an excellent coach. I think he was kind of dealt an unfair hand with the Panthers at the end of his tenure, similar to Doug Peterson. So I don't know. I just think the Commanders should be better. How do you feel about that?
I think Ron Rivera, some people are saying he should be fired. I don't agree with that at all. I think that the Commanders need culture right now, and to already fire him, we saw how good of a job he did with the 2020 at the time football team, but Commanders. And I don't know. I just think this Commanders defense, they played pretty well against the run. They stifled Elliott and Pollard completely. I agree. The secondary, it needs a bit of a facelift there. But hopefully Chase Young, if he can get back to form, he's out right now. Hopefully if he comes back, they can give him an edge. I think Ron Rivera deserves at least another season with the Commanders to maybe get a quarterback, maybe get, a better secondary, because I think that these receivers, as I've touched on before on this podcast, I think they're really good. I think their O-line's okay. I think Gibson is starting to play better this year, as I've been clamoring for a while. I like Brian Robinson. I know he hasn't played yet, but I think when he plays, he's going to be good. I think he's got a good future ahead of him. So I kind of like the Commanders. I just think they need to, maybe draft someone this year and get rid of Wentz, because everyone's been saying Ron Rivera can't coach an offense, but I'm like, he was Cam Newton's coach in Carolina for pretty much the whole time. I think he knows how to at least coach a little bit of offense at times, even if his teams can be inconsistent year to year. I don't think he's a terrible coach at all. I think the Commanders need him. And as for Dallas, just to wrap up on them, I think this went perfectly for them without Dak. I think this is probably going to be the last week of Cooper Rush. And then week 6, I think Dak is going to come back. This went perfect for them, and I think they're very much in the driver's seat to be one of the wild card teams. Don't think they're better than the Eagles, but I like how the defense is playing. Michael Gallup is back now, and he'll probably get better as the weeks go by. And I thought this was CeeDee's best game of the season. So I'm encouraged with Dallas. I think they can definitely win about 10 games and make the playoffs.
I mean, that's fair. I did speak badly of them. I still don't think they're an amazing team. And even if they do make the wild cards, which I do.
The NFC is terrible. The NFC is terrible.
That's a good point. There's a lot of bad teams who are good. A lot of people, even Matthew was saying, I'm worried about the Giants. They're 3-1, and it's like, it doesn't matter if they're 3-1. They're just a bad team. Yeah. Like, if they've played very weak teams, they've played teams worse than them. And I wouldn't worry about that too much. But the Cowboys, I think it's kind of interesting that Cooper Rush has played so well. And good for him. It's always nice to see a backup quarterback come in and not play terribly. And it's kind of funny because I've seen some people, not a lot of people, probably a lot of irrational people, but some people are like, "Oh, let's trade Dak and keep Cooper Rush."
That's nonsense.
Which I think is just kind of funny. It's like, all right, let's pump the brakes. I understand that Dak Prescott doesn't have the poise to win a playoff game just yet, he has won playoff games, but he's not the greatest playoff quarterback in my opinion. And, I understand that, but I mean, Dak Prescott is a vast improvement over Cooper Rush. And, if their offense if their offense is probably going to improve with Dak Prescott, but if it doesn't, then I would start to be super concerned about them. I still don't think they're an amazing team. I think there's a lot of better teams to beat them. So even if they do make the playoffs and they win a few games, I don't think they're going to get anywhere near the Super Bowl. So I don't think any Cowboys fans should be getting too excited. I understand that they beat the Commanders pretty handily, but the Commanders have not played excellently either. So Dallas is kind of up in the air with how good they're going to be, but I'm leaning more pessimistically about them still. So
I just like their schedule. I think it's the same thing with the Eagles, which is why before the year I picked them to be the 1 seed. I think Dallas, they play a bunch of crap teams, including the Giants and Commanders. Listen, I know the Giants are 3-1. If the Packers lose to them in London, it's going to be because Saquon ran for 200 yards on our apparently bad run defenses I touched on earlier. But their receivers are terrible. They have no receivers. They don't have any. Sterling Shepard is hurt out for the season. He was really the only viable guy they had. Now, they do have Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney, who have both been out, and those are young guys with potential. So it'll be interesting to see if those guys, when they come back, can elevate this Giants receiving corps. But right now, I mean, Kenny Golladay, Richie James, that's really even the only guys I know and recognize. They're not up to the task. So I don't like the Giants receiving corps at all. I think the Packers are gonna maybe limit Daniel Jones to like 50 pass yards next week in London.
Yeah,
that might be a bold prediction. I don't take that literally, but it could happen. He only had 70-something yards this week.
Honestly, I don't even think that's that crazy of a prediction considering Daniel Jones, as we discussed, we feel is personally the worst starting quarterback in the NFL right now. Unfortunately, worse than Cooper Rush somehow. Yep. So, I don't know. I wouldn't be worried about the Packers losing to the Giants, even if Saquon plays well, which I don't think he will, unfortunately, because I think teams are going to, from now on, start keying in on him because they know there's no wide receivers. They're only decent wide receiver, Sterling Shepard, and has been unfortunately lost to an ACL injury. He's lost his entire year again. And it's kind of seems like that's the trend of Sterling Shepard right now. Yes, and I don't see this team like doing much because everyone's going to be focusing on Saquon. And I understand that their rush defense is kind of not amazing, but they're also going to count on Saquon a lot in the pass game as well because their wide receivers are not great. And I think that's where they're going to keep him in check. He still might rush for plenty of yards, but ultimately the Giants can't be just a one-dimensional team, and they're probably not going to win this game that way. And I wouldn't be too worried about it if I were a Packers fan. So
No, I'm only worried about because we almost lost last week, but I also don't think we're going to replicate that. But anyway, I agree with you that the NFC East, I don't know how Dallas is going to fare in the playoffs, but I'm pretty optimistic about their regular season. So, but yeah, the Eagles I think are definitely the class of the NFC East. So just moving to our last few games here that we wanted to cover. What do you think about Jets Steelers? Zach Wilson's debut. Really, the only story I really want to address here. What did you think? Kenny Pickett coming in was the right move to make at the time.
Oh, for sure. I just want to shout out the Jets. I obviously they are division rivals of the Dolphins, so I'm not going to root for them. But I definitely think that the Jets are going places. They've shown promise. Zach Wilson didn't play terribly this game. He's finally showing why he might have been picked in the first round, so good for him. As for, of course, the biggest storyline of this game, which is really the only important thing, because I'm not surprised the Steelers lost. As we discussed,
the win last week, yeah.
We did pick the Jets to win last week because
I swayed you. I swayed you.
You did. I originally was going to say the Steelers, but honestly, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, these Jets are just a better team. They play better.
Mm-hmm.
But as for the Steelers, I do think putting Kenny Pickett in was absolutely the right decision. Even if Matt Canada still sucks as an offensive coordinator, I think Kenny Pickett's just a little bit better. And he didn't play amazingly in this game. He threw those 2 picks, which were honestly just really bad picks, very much rookie mistake picks. But, as you go on into the season and you play more games, I think he's going to play better and all that. So I don't think they should be too worried about Kenny Pickett just yet. I do think he'll be better than Mitch Trubisky. And I think Mitch Trubisky will unfortunately be relegated to his backup role the rest of the season. So I'm excited about it also because I think that means guys like George Pickens and Deontay Johnson are going to start to play better, which is exciting for, fantasy owners and, of course, fans of George Pickens. Obviously, I'm a big fan of George Pickens. I like the guy. I think he's funny. And I think he's a better receiver than he's been allowed to be by this offense. And I think just getting a slightly better quarterback is a huge upgrade for them. And, the Steelers, I still don't think they're going to go many places just because the team just as a whole hasn't played excellently. But I think that definitely their offense will for sure improve after this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about time that Pickens, Deontay would start being used properly because I don't know if it's going to train. Like you said, I don't know if it'll change drastically because Canada is still going to be running this offense. But Pickett, I don't know. It seemed like he was at least more competent than Trubisky. I thought he was certainly not great, like you said, but I also thought he didn't do anything really horrific. I know that first interception was kind of tipped. It was kind of up for grabs. Wasn't a great throw to make, but also could have very easily been caught if the ball went a little differently up in the air there. So I don't know. I don't think the Steelers are going places this year. I ranked them 29th on my power rankings on Twitter this week, but I still think they have a lot of good players. And in the future, I hope they can continue to improve. They need to get Najee Harris going. Kenny Pickett had 2 rushing touchdowns. A lot of fantasy football fans were not happy with that when it could have been Najee, but that's just the design they went with. But I don't know. I don't think the Steelers are going to do very well this year. This might be the worst season Mike Tomlin's coached them. But at the same time, he won, 8 games with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. I think Kenny Pickett's better than those guys. So maybe they can turn it around. But look at the schedule. I mean, people have been talking about it. They got the Bills, the Dolphins, Tampa, and I believe maybe the Ravens as their next 4 games. They got a lot of tough matchups. So I don't think they're going to be able to gel very quickly here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I just think it's going to be a rough season for them. It's just not lining up well for them, as you're saying. I think the schedule is a huge part of that. Playing teams like the Bills, it's very demoralizing to probably get crushed because they most likely will be. Yeah. Unfortunately, the Bills are just a much better team every which way. So I don't have a lot to say about the Steelers. Honestly, I agree with a lot of what you said. I don't think the Steelers are going anywhere this year. And even though they did play well or get a decent record with Duck Hodges somehow at quarterback, I think eventually that streak of, there's only so much you can do as a good head coach. We've seen that with the Patriots is that even if Bill Belichick is a legendary NFL head coach and one of the best all time. There's only so much you can do if your team is just not up to par.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because we should talk about the Seahawks and Lions game. Two teams who played way above anyone's expectations, I would say personally, for this game. I mean, I'm blown out of the water by this score. I mean, 48-45. I mean, they scored for what, combined 92 points? That's insane.
Yeah, Gino Smith, I can't believe how well he's playing. Jared Goff, I can't believe how well he's playing, either of them, especially Gino, just because, we haven't seen him. At least Goff, we've seen him with the Rams, but they've both been very good. I don't think it's, sustainable for the entire season whatsoever, but I thought Detroit was going to win this game. I don't really know why, because looking at it, like, they didn't have Swift, they didn't have Amon-Ra. I don't know why I forgot him for a second. Amon-Ra, and then I picked them to win because they still had Chark and Hawkinson, but then Chark went out too. So I don't know. I thought that at that point it could have gone either way, and the Seahawks did win. But Hawkinson had 39 fantasy points on my bench this week. Josh Reynolds showed up. Jamal Williams, my guy, he was incredible in this game. And at the other side, Penny was awesome. DK Metcalf came back to life. So I don't know. Both these teams have terrible defenses, and it showed. Like, I don't think this is even a one-off. I think both these teams' defenses are not good. I think isn't the stat the Lions have the top scoring offense and have also allowed the most points. Like, that's how their season's going so far. But at the same time, this is a really fun game, and I'm surprised that the two quarterbacks were able to create such a competition here.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I think it just kind of speaks to like as to why Geno Smith and Jared Goff to some extent were drafted as high as they were. Jared Goff was the number 1 overall pick, and Geno Smith was drafted in the second round for a reason, and I think a lot of people are forgetting that. I've been very vocally a Jared Goff disbeliever. Yeah. I think Jared Goff has been just a very mid quarterback. I don't think he's terrible, but I just don't think he's good either. And I think a lot of his success came on the back of Sean McVay. But it kind of seems like Jared Goff is kind of coming into his own a little bit. I don't think Jared Goff, we're ever going to really see him as this high-end type starter. And I think he'll be a serviceable starter and eventual mentor to whatever young quarterback comes in for the Lions, be it next year or these next few years. But I think the Lions have a bright future ahead of them. I think they continuously showed that this year, especially with their win over the Commanders. It was a very, very strong performance from them, especially from Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think it's going to be huge when he comes back for them. But ultimately, I think the Lions are on an upward track, and the Seahawks surprisingly also seem to be on an upward track. So it's kind of interesting game for these two teams. Although admittedly, their defense does need some work.
Yeah, I mean, just to allow as many points as they did is just crazy. I definitely agree. I think the Lions, you could even argue Jared Goff has more weapons than he did in LA, at least in number wise, because, you're going to have Jameson Williams coming back eventually. Chark looks a little bit rejuvenated. Josh Reynolds looks like he's playing the best he ever has, and he has that connection with Goff from the Rams. Amon-Ra was a huge steal. And Hawkinson, he's pretty good. Some weeks he disappears, but this week he definitely didn't disappear. He was insane this week. Not to mention I think Swift and Williams is a great backfield. So, I mean, even Reynolds, when he comes in, is all right. I always have to force him in there. I mean, he hasn't done as much this year, but I like talking about Craig Reynolds as well. So, yeah, overall, their offense is great. I don't know if if the Lions made the playoffs this year, do you still think they'd try to replace Goff? I think long-term, yeah, but if they were to sneak into the playoffs, I think he'd be back another year.
Yeah, no, I don't think the Lions draft his replacement unless they get an extremely high draft pick, which honestly, at this rate, it doesn't seem super likely for the Lions because they've been playing amazingly, all things considered. Mm-hmm. And especially with this quarterback class, obviously my analysis of quarterbacks in college is very limited compared to how I would analyze an NFL quarterback because college prospects are so hard to garner sometimes. But a lot of people have started to raise some doubts about CJ Stroud as being one of the top prospects, and people are trying to tout Anthony Richardson as a top prospect now. So it's kind of confusing what's happening with them. So I don't see the Lions picking his replacement unless either it's a high draft pick or they're 100% sure on this young kid. Yeah, because it would be a waste to not damage the bridge with Goff, but drafting his replacement definitely does fracture that relationship a bit. So if anything, I see them drafting someone like 5th or 6th as a developmental starter backup type guy, and then and if they get a high draft pick another year, then they draft a young quarterback. But I don't see it happening this year as their season seems to be going.
Well, what's their record right now? Are they 1-3?
Yes, they are 1-3.
So I don't think they're that bad, but maybe they're just going to keep losing these high scoring games. If that happens, then they definitely could get a high pick. I think they're going to crawl into that like 12 to 15 range, though. I think that's where they're going to finish. I think they're really good.
Yeah, that's what I agree with. I think they're 1-3 now, but considering how well they're playing, some of these, close games have to swing their way at some point. But I don't think they're going to be high enough a selection for a Bryce Young type. So I think that their best bet is to wait until another year when maybe the quarterback class is a bit more solid, because, outside of the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, these the rest of these top prospects are very it seems to be kind of scattered with who it's supposed to be. So it's kind of interesting to see what's with that, especially because Bryce Young, he did get injured in the last Alabama game, and his backup, who people seem to love, I believe his name was Prentice. People love the kid. Apparently he played really great in that game too. So it remains to be seen what happens with him and his injury, and also who the rest of these top quarterbacks are. So I don't think we see the Lions take a quarterback just yet if Jared Goff continues to play as decently as he seems to be.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the Lions will have to start focusing on that defense going forward. So we'll have to see how they build the team. But the Lions last week, they did lose to the Vikings, and the Vikings got another win this week in London. They escaped by the skin of their teeth, though, because the Saints could have forced overtime. Lutz nailed the 60-yarder, but then he doinked the another double doink. He double doinked the 60-yarder. So the Vikings got another win. They're 3-1 on the season now. What do you think of that game? Just to wrap up, that's the last game we're going to talk about. I don't know. I thought it was a pretty good game for London, but I don't know what to make of the Vikings necessarily.
Yeah, no, I think it was definitely one of the better London games we've seen. I mean, the only other notable London game I can really think of was last year's game was Falcons Jets, or at least one of them was. And that game was only notable really because Cordell Patterson played really well, and that was one of his breakout games last season. And but other than that, I think what's kind of funny is a lot of people are making memes about Will Lutz, about how British fans are excited to see him completing the crossbar challenge, which I think is a funny little just tangent. But as for the game itself, I would say it's definitely one of the better ones. The last one I remember being really exciting was I don't know if you remember a few years back, Rams Giants, when they still had Janoris Jenkins, Landon Collins. I remember that being a fun game. But usually these London games aren't as interesting, and it's really exciting to see a close game from them this time. And I thought we saw a lot of good from both teams. I think Kirk Cousins and Andy Dalton, these two quarterbacks who face a lot of criticism from time to time, I think they played admirably. I think they played pretty well, all things considered, especially in crunch time. Ultimately Andy Dalton couldn't get them close enough for Will Lutz to finish the game off, or at least get them into overtime. But I thought that he still played admirably, as did Kirk Cousins. I saw him make some great passes to Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson definitely had a great game. Definitely had a bounce back after he had a slump game against Eagles, didn't play amazing against the Lions. So I think it was a good game all around. I think both teams are going to be just fine. I think these are going to be two teams we see fighting for wild card spots, though.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the Vikings I think it was interesting that it was this close. It's good for the Saints, because we were talking to Chris last week, and even though he picked the Saints to win, it didn't seem like he was very confident. It seems like he was kind of just picking them because he wanted his team to win. But I thought the Saints played a lot better than I thought they were going to, without Kamara, without Mike Thomas, without Jameis. So that's encouraging. I think Olave's been great. I think he's been a great pick, and I hope that continues. And it's interesting, Latavius Murray filled in Kamara pretty well, but since he was technically still in the practice squad, Denver signed him to replace Javonte Williams or help out Melvin Gordon, I guess. So it's kind of interesting they lose him, because I think he played better than Mark Ingram did. But I don't know. I think I still have hope for the Saints, as I mentioned before. I like that defense a lot, but I don't know. It seems like they might not be a wild card team, but at the same time, the NFC, as we've talked about, isn't very good. So maybe they'll make a rally. But I definitely think this was a good win for the Vikings. At 3-1, I think they're pretty solidified as a playoff contender.
Oh, for sure. I do think the Vikings, although they did have a bad game against the Eagles, I think it's pretty easy to have a bad game against a great team like that. But I do think it was really encouraging what we saw from both of them. I think, especially your point about the Saints offense played remarkably well considering their top wide receiver, Michael Thomas, was out. I totally agree with you. I think Chris Olave filled in incredibly well. I think he's a great, not a steal necessarily, but he was just a great pick for them. And I think that's really going to pay dividends in the future, especially, when a guy like Jarvis Landry, although he is their third receiver, he's getting older, and it's nice to have a young guy like Olave there as a replacement.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I did like what we saw from both these teams, and I thought it was a really exciting game.
I agree. Yeah, I think it was definitely good. I'm hoping this Packers London game can be a little bit just as good, or maybe even not a good game in terms of the Packers blowing the Giants out. Either way, I would take it. But that's pretty much going to do it for this episode. Before we go, do you want to share any thoughts on the news today that broke Tom Brady and Giselle might be getting divorced? I don't really want to we don't need to talk about the personal aspects of that because we obviously don't know what's going on in their household. But at the same time, I think we can kind of read between the lines that has to do with Brady not retiring this year. So what's your take on that?
I mean, I don't want to delve in too deep because obviously, we don't know these people personally. But if the reading between the lines is to be believed, I totally understand where this fracture is coming from. I think it's definitely interesting to unretire yourself and decommit yourself from your family. But that's just me. But ultimately, no, that's his business. I hope both sides of this issue come out well. And, also, but more than that, I would hope that hopefully they don't end up getting a divorce because you never want to see a broken household with, young kids. But, it's kind of interesting to see football topics spiral into something this personal and intimate. But then again, Antonio Brown seems to drag us into that every season. So it's not a shocker anymore at this rate.
Yeah, I can't remember if this has ever happened before in terms of if a player his relationship with someone, whether it's marriage or just dating, whatever, them breaking up had an actual impact on the NFL. But I actually think this might have a real impact. I think Tom Brady might be in the league for another 3 to 5 years now, because before I thought he was retiring because I thought it was he wants to come back for one more year. But the reason he's taken some time off in the offseason, the reason he looks a little less focused is because maybe, his wife wants him to retire. He himself wanted to retire, but now it kind of seems like his wife did and he didn't want to. So I don't know. I could totally see if Tom Brady actually does get divorced from Giselle, I could totally see him just be I'm going to keep playing because that's what I want to do. And he could be around for a few more years here. So I think that would be really wild. That would be a really wild turn of events. It's been a really crazy year for Tom Brady. So I think it's kind of just interesting. I don't know. That's just my
Yeah,
take.
no, for sure. Especially because it's so publicized. Because even when players unfortunately have issues with domestic abuse, they never receive this much coverage because it doesn't have insane ripple effects as it does with Tom Brady. And it would be kind of insane to see him play 4 or 5 more years when what else can he accomplish?
Yeah.
It's such an interesting question. Is it really worth it for Tom Brady? Especially because this year he hasn't played amazingly, and you have to wonder is this because of the divorce? Is his age finally catching up? I mean, the guy's 45.
Yeah.
That's incredibly. He's very old for someone to be at his position. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's one of the longest tenured NFL quarterbacks. I believe besides Johnny Unitas was the second oldest or is the oldest ever.
And there's George Blanda, but he was also a kicker for half of his career.
Oh,
Kind
yeah.
of cheating, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's incredible. It's been incredibly long. Yeah, I believe 23 years in the league. I mean, it's insane to have played this long. So it kind of remains to be seen. It's kind of interesting that a topic like this, so personal, as you were saying, has this much of a ripple effect on the league, and I think that's what makes it so publicized right now. So
Yeah, I definitely agree. So we'll have to see how the situation with the Buccaneers plays out, both on the field and off the field for Brady. But I don't know. I just can't remember a story like that. So I thought we might touch on it, even though it's kind of personal. So that's pretty much going to do it for this edition of the Fan Committee. Thank you guys for listening today. We're going to be back on Friday. We're going to do game picks again for the Week 5 slate. We're going to have a special guest. Eagles fan Matt Mueller is joining the pod. I know he's excited to talk some birds. He's going to be very excited. So stay tuned for that. But other than that, thank you guys for listening. Catch you next time.